So we did. We put out 2 episodes, and we had Ashish hosting Shri G. Kishan Reddy, the Honorable Minister for State, on the Hyderabad Liberation Day. I found that episode particularly enlightening because I had no idea about plenty of those historical facets that was spoken about. It kind of leaves me wondering what else I don't know about our history that was taught, right? Ashish, what do you think about the IPL episode?
Yeah, finally something to look forward to, carry in the otherwise a very drab and a dull year. IPL starts in about 20 minutes from now, and I'm hoping that Mumbai Indians will win the first match against CSK.
Okay, that's a bold bet. And moving on, the first item that we want to discuss this week is the fact that FDI in defense was upped to around 74%, right? So these investments will be subject to scrutiny on grounds of national security, obviously. But this is really important considering that India imports about 70% of its military hardware, right? Between 2000 to 2020, we've received anywhere between 57 crore FDI equity inflows, right? So the decision was announced by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman in May as part of the 20 lakh coronavirus stimulus package, right? And so Ashish, what do you think about this?
Yeah, so we had 49% FDI via the auto approval route. Now that's up to 74%. The FDI can be 100% also, but subject to conditions on technology transfers and maintaining certain contractual obligations, and as you said, national security. This is an important development because, just to give you some statistics, Carrie, our defense exports were just 0.2 billion in 2016-17. We upped that to 0.7 billion in 2017-18. And from there, it went to about 1.5 billion. So it's about 700% increase in about 2 years. I don't have the stats for the latest financial year, 1920. But the fact is that there's a big defense export potential in India. We need our own military industrial complex. There are several players, in India, like Mahindra, Tata, L&T, Bharat Forge, Hinduja, Solar Industries, Astra Microwave. I mean, there are a whole bunch of players who can really make it big in this field. But the fact is that we really haven't tapped the full potential yet. And India, as you said, remains the second biggest importer of weapons. The announcement was made, as you said, as part of the 20 lakh crore package announced by the finance minister in May, but that has just been notified through the press note this week. One key thing here is that the government has already taken some steps to put this in action earlier. A group of ministers under the leadership of Raksha Mantri Shri Rajnath Singh has been constituted, which will look at the corporatization of the ordnance factories. I think that's one key step towards this area where we can have more private partnerships for specific weapon systems coming in. So the process has been rolled off. Now let's see how far it goes. And from a net importer, and I mean, we are struggling right now with a war-like situation on two fronts. We are struggling to kind of get our weaponry in place. I mean, hopefully the next time the situation arises, we would be making some of the equipment needed ourselves in India.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I guess all of this ties in with the Aatmanirbhar Bharat thought process, right?
Yeah. Carrie, just a couple of points to add. One is, I think, as Ashish mentioned, we are the second largest arms importer in the world. We account for like 9% of the global arms import. And China, even though its defense budget is 2.5 times that of India, it only accounts for 5% roughly of the arms import. The other thing is that a country's GDP per capita and engineering advancements are sort of linked at the core. So one thing this should do is China, even though its defense budget level of 2.5 times engineering, it only accounts for manufacturing capability of the arms import. So that other thing is that help in countries our goal for GDP becoming a $5 trillion economy. So it should be seen in that context as well. It's a very important step. If things fall in place and we see companies investing in this area, we will actually see a big bump in per capita GDP and the overall progress of the nation. So it should not just be seen in isolation in terms of you know in FDI in defense.
That's a fantastic point, Vatsa. Okay, moving on. So we had the United States ban TikTok and WeChat, right? So President Trump mentioned that a deal could see TikTok's continued usage. I mean, I don't know if any other US president has used the word deal in policy matters as much as Trump, right? I mean, well, to be expected from someone who wrote The Art of the Deal, right? So obviously, I mean, this is in light of the fact that these apps collect a huge amount of data from users, including network activity, location data, browsing, search histories, and so on, right? So I think by November 12th, if this deal does not go through, then TikTok and WeChat will effectively be banned, right? Vatsa, I come to you with this. What do you make of this? I mean, the US following India's lead?
Yeah, and coincidentally, I think when we had Ajit Pai, he had also mentioned that India has taken a good step in using the application layer to ban foreign apps. So Trump had signed this executive order in the first week of August to ban WeChat and TikTok. The thing is, with WeChat, it's a very different kind of app for Chinese, right? It's developed by Tencent. We all know that, but WeChat it's not just an app for communication. It also has payments, and it sort of ties Chinese-speaking individuals across the globe, right? So the impact in terms of people is going to be much more. But as I'd mentioned in an earlier weekly, I think the challenge is that we have a situation in China government, there isn't a clear distinction in terms of how much the government owns in the company and what stake it has and how much decision making authority it has, what access to the data it has, or in terms of how the company is run. In such a situation, for apps that collect data from millions of individuals to be allowed to function is it can be seen as a risk to the sovereignty of individual countries. So in that sense, it's a completely understandable move. Also, unlike Facebook has taken some measures to combat fake news or hate speech. We've not heard of anything that has been done on WeChat, or we have no visibility as to how WeChat, targets these problems that exist with instant messaging. So, considering all of these, it was to be expected at some point of time. In addition, we don't know how they, for instance, censor information against the Chinese government. There are a bunch of things, right? It's completely opaque. So it's very logical for any democratic country to question and then block these apps, because without a certain level of transparency that exists in the rest of the democratic world, these apps should not be allowed to function as if things are normal.
Yeah, a couple of things jump out to me actually. When Google decided not to operate in China, for example, I think this was way back, maybe 10 years back. I don't think anyone really paid attention to what Google was saying in terms of, hey, I mean, we were asked to share a bunch of this data with the government or whatever
and then block
it is,
these
right?
apps, because
and here you're seeing this come around full circle where people are taking full cognizance of the fact that, hey, data is such a thing that has to be protected, and it's sovereign, right, in its nature. So yeah, this is pretty interesting, I would say, and it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward. Ashish, your comments?
Yeah, I actually don't think this ban goes far enough per se. Yes, I mean WeChat, of course, like the US use will stop, but the US citizens will be able to use for Chinese payments, which I think is logical given the Chinese expat population in the US, plus the fact that there are transactions to be made. But TikTok, I don't think it goes far, like too far. What the government is saying is that till November 12th, they have time to strike a deal. So there are no new downloads or updates possible on the in the US, but as such, the users can of course continue to use the app. But and if there's a deal which I mean has fallen through with Microsoft, and I think even the Oracle one has not satisfied President Trump. Essentially, he has just left it to the next president. The election happens on November 3rd, and he is basically it's more a symbolic thing. I mean, if Biden wins, then nothing might happen actually after November 12th. And even then, ByteDance has an option to basically agree to the terms which Trump has outlined and still continue to function. So it's not fully there. I'm not sure if it really satisfies the security aspect of it. This seems more like essentially classic Trump trade focus. What the government is saying is that till November, not a security focused step.
Yeah,
and he is
no,
basically
it's
more
all
symbolic
signaling, basically, I think, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on, we had another landmark event that happened, which is the government passed 3 bills as part of the Aatmanirbharkisan package. These laws govern agricultural produce, marketing, contract farming, and it's also an amendment to the Essential Commodities Act. So while the government has been claiming that these reforms will help farmers to get a better price for their products and so on, there have been plenty of agitation against these changes as well. So from farmers groups and so on. In view of this, we also saw the Union Minister Harsimrat Kaur of Shiromani Akali Dal quit the government, right, over these bills. So any comments on this, Ashish? I mean, agriculture is one of those things which is heavily politicized, right? Also because a lot of incumbent interests are at play. Bold move by the government in that light.
So this was also announced, Carrie, as a part of the package in May, where the government had already announced these reforms, and in fact the ordinances were already in play. So as such, the changes had already happened as of May. This act essentially tries to replace the ordinance with the permanent legislative backing. So the 2 acts which were passed were Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Bill, and the second one was Farmer Empowerment and Protection Agreement on Price Assurance and Farm Services Bill, and of course the amendments to the Essential Commodities Act, which had already happened earlier in the week. So, I mean, the changes are not new. The opposition to this is new because this was known since May as such. And as several people have pointed out, Congress had promised exactly the same thing in the manifesto earlier. I mean, I guess reading of manifestos has not been very popular until Modi's second term started, where people suddenly realized that there are a bunch of things in the manifestos which are already happening, which are actually happening. And looks like BJP has moved on to the Congress manifesto now, not just checking its own boxes, but also checking what was promised by the opponents. But so as such, I think it's a fairly landmark situation. I would, like several people have said, that this is a 1991 moment for Indian agriculture. Markets open up completely. The Babu Raj agriculture in the whole essential, because of the Essential Commodities Act, the Inspector Raj kind of ends as there'll be no stock holding limits. What we must be ready for is a little bit of food inflation in India, and especially in the BJP governments. The urban consumers have been always given a priority over farmers. It's a fact. If you see, the inflation in BJP regimes is always low, which also means that farmers don't always get the benefit of the price changes, but the urban consumers is generally a kind of better off. And I think the reason there is that obviously BJP comes with a trading and urban middle class kind of a background. I mean, the voters come from there, so traditionally the low inflation has always benefited this class. But with this in place, with these laws in place, I mean, the really good farmers would be able to manage not just what they grow and how they sell, but also the stocks which they hold and the timing of when they sell it, right? So I think that is also very critical, and which will could lead to some bit of food inflation because of the demand supply, localized demand supply equations. But I think that's part of the redistribution of the gains in the value chain of the agriculture market. So to be expected, and I think to be also accepted in that sense by especially by the urban voters.
Right. Yeah, farmers have to exercise some amount of power on pricing, right? I mean, they're the only class of people I can think of who, buy retail and sell wholesale in that sense, right? In another light, I mean, remember the second half of the 90s when something like this would collapse the government? Well,
yes.
Yeah. So now that the government has 300 plus seats, they can confidently go about their ways, right? All right, moving on, we had another historic event happen. So the leaders of the United Arab Emirates, UAE, and Bahrain signed agreements normalizing ties with Israel. So along with Egypt and Jordan, they are the other two countries, the Arab countries that officially recognize the Jewish state. Since Prince Mohammed bin Salman came to power in 2015, Saudi Arabia has made moves behind the scenes to strengthen ties with Jerusalem. Right, Saudi sees Israel as a natural partner in containing Iran, a rival to both these states. The alliance will allow greater cooperation and coordination in regional security, diplomacy, and trade. And the United States is sort of set to reconfigure the global supply chain as seen with more economic restrictions and strain on China. The UAE-Israel alliance is one of those geopolitical moves. So, Ashish, major moves on the geopolitical front. Your comments?
Yeah, Carrie. See this. If you go back in history, since 1967, there has been the Arab-Israel conflict. In the declaration of Arab League in 67 in Khartoum, I think the countries had agreed on no peace, no recognition, and no negotiations with Israel due to the Palestine situation. I think that seems to be getting normalized now, and also clearly a Shia-Sunni politics at play, where all the Sunni countries are trying to now normalize their relationships with Israel, with the hope that that would be like a counter to Iran in the region. I think we spoke about this earlier in one of the episodes, that this actually will have a big influence on the global geopolitics and how the various alignments take place. And as it stands, I mean, Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, China, and potentially Russia seems like one grouping, and then everyone else on the other side. So yeah, and fairly interesting. I'm sure President Trump could get if President Trump was President Obama, he could have got a Nobel Prize for this. But since he's not, he probably won't. But I think one of those historic things which this week brought up.
Yeah. So Carrie, one of the things related to Middle East politics was that Palestinians had always imposed certain unstated axioms. They're like called as undeniable truths by most Arab countries, in the sense that till there was no solution to the Palestine problem, no Arab country would do business with Israel. They could not have normalized relations with Israel. This was treated almost like a truth of sorts, a tautology of sorts almost. You'd probably see a video of John Kerry circulating where he said that probably just 3 or 4 years ago. For a long time, this had happened, but what this one measure has done is this has shown that other Arab states have sort of moved on. They want normalized relationships with Israel. They want to have trade ties with Israel, and it's a good step. It's a good step going ahead, because countries are taking decisions, based on their self-interest, and putting sort of their interests above some of these ideas. So from that point of view, I think it's a good thing.
Can you also, let's look at it from India's perspective, right? Like we have taken a different approach to foreign policy, where we have balanced our interests with Saudi, UAE, other countries in the region, and Israel since the Modi government was sworn in 2014. In previous regimes or previous years, this used to be like a bit of a binary for us, that okay, either you support the Palestine cause or the Arab nations, but stay away from Israel, or there was a section of the commentariat which would always back Israel, normalization with Israel, but then less focus on Arab nations. But the fact is that given India has got so many so many Indians work in those countries, we could have never ignored the relationships with a Saudi or a UAE or other countries in that region, especially also because of the oil dependency, right? So while we take steps to move away from the oil dependence which we've had, but the fact is that India always had to play this like a dual card. And the good thing is now with this regional alliance in place, it will become easier for India. Also, there's also some talk that the Jebel Ali port will now work with the Haifa port to develop shipping capabilities for Israel. I mean, some of those trade talks are already on. This could be again a big moment for India, because the opportunities which will arise because of the trade normalization between Israel and Arab nations, that would need a lot of infrastructure creation, which actually Indian companies or Indian even government-owned corporations can basically participate in. So actually, it's a pretty big deal for India also, if things go well, of course. I mean, a lot depends on how the US election results pan out in November. And then the extent of some of these changes will come into play. But a pretty good development for India as well overall.
Yeah. It's remarkable the number of historic events that are happening in very close proximity to each other, right? So this is great point, Ashish. All right, moving on, we had So we had Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurate the 1.9 kilometer Kosi bridge along with 12 other railway projects across Bihar. The construction has been a much awaited project for Kosi and Mithilanchal regions. The mega rail bridge will also facilitate long distance travel benefits by train for the people of Kolkata, Delhi and Mumbai. Prime Minister Modi said a new history has been created in the field of rail connectivity in Bihar. These projects will also strengthen West Bengal and Eastern India's rail connectivity. At this point, many parts of Bihar are cut off from each other due to many rivers crisscrossing the state. Efforts are being made to shape the Indian railways to fulfill the expectations of a Aatmanirbhar Bharat. Pretty interesting development, Vatsa.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw a video by I think Sanjay Mishra, where he spoke about the history of this bridge and how there was a meter gauge that was built in 1887, which he said was about 250 feet. That was washed away in 1934, and there has been no bridge across the Kosi River since then. And due to, as you mentioned, due to the nature of this bridge, meandering nature of the river, there was no attempt made to build a bridge across this river. Uh, it it uh, it it's taken 86 years. So if the bridge was washed off in 1934, so it's taken a long time. The bridge was sanctioned in 2003-4, so it's taken a pretty long time to complete. It's taken about 16-17 years to complete it, and it's cut down 300-kilometer journey to about 22 kilometers. So that's a big, huge thing. I mean, being in cities, we don't realize some of the problems, in some of these states. So overall, this was just one of the projects, and I think there were many other projects that were dedicated to the nation by the Honorable Prime Minister. So overall, infrastructure improving in Bihar is a good thing. It's as I said earlier, if you have to move the needle on the $5 trillion economy, we have to have like major gains in UP and Bihar. Without that, it's not going to happen. And infrastructure is obviously going to play a big role in that. Very, very excited and happy that we are seeing more infrastructure being built in these states.
Yeah, Carrie, if you see the map, which is visible on the screen, look at the location of that. I mean, the red dot signifies what the location of the bridges. This is actually quite strategic in other ways also. That the location is closer to towards the Kishanganj side. That's the chicken neck area, right? So even for the movement of Indian army troops, men material. This connectivity from the Gorakhpur side, which falls on the towards the west of that bridge, that eases up the connectivity as well. Also, Kosi River. I mean, like as Vatsa said, it's a meandering river. We see floods every year because the river keeps changing its course, and which means that the Kosi area, the districts of Saharsa, Madhepura, and Sufal, and the Mithilanchal area, which is essentially the districts of Saharsa, Muzaffarpur, Bhagalpur, and Darbhanga, they generally remain cut off. So the north and the south part of Bihar are generally cut off from each other. And I think that the fact that a state which has got such high population density is not where people cannot move from one part to another part is quite stunning actually. And like I this is another project which was pending for like 86 years, and finally it's got done. And as PM remarked, the bridge fell when there was an earthquake, and now it's being reconstructed when there's a pandemic. So some divine connection there in terms of how the bridge has come up again.
Fantastic. So last week we also had Engineers Day, which was 15 September. Sir M. Vishweshwaraya is one widely regarded as one of the most prolific engineers we have produced. He's the chief architect behind the construction of the Krishnaraja Sagara Dam, which all of us living in Bangalore, Mysore, surrounding areas would have made one school trip or the other at some point of time, right? He was also responsible for founding the Mysore Soap Factory, the Mysore Iron and Steel Works in Bhadravati, Sri Jayachamrajendra Polytechnic Institute, the Bangalore Agricultural University, and the State Bank of Mysore, apparently. Right. He was awarded the nation's highest honor, Bharatvaarta, in 1955 for his outstanding work as a chief engineer of the KRS Dam. Sir MV was also knighted as a commander of the British Indian Empire by King George V. Guys, all of us are reformed engineers. We owe this man our, I don't know if we should say like our due apologies for not being efficient engineers, or I mean, what do we have to say, right? So your favorite engineering memories?
Carrie, actually, when it comes to Sir M. Vishweshwaraya, the first memory I have is a story that my father related to me, which was that he was traveling in a train, and at midnight he suddenly pulled the chain. Came sort of check on him and asked him why he had done that. And he said that the sound coming from the tracks was unusual, and there was an issue with the track. And so they went and actually checked it. And the track had kind of separated some distance away. So he had saved many lives. So that's my first memory of hearing about Vishweshwaraya. He was a civil engineer, and he implemented a pretty intricate irrigation system in the Deccan Plateau, which still exists today. Also, the Khadakwasla Reservoir near Pune, which I'm sure Ashish would have visited. He I think designed that as well. So overall, I think he's one of the greatest Indians. Someone who probably till recently was not very well known, but now thanks to Engineers Day being celebrated every year, people are getting to know more about a very great man.
Ashish?
Yeah, Carrie, I mean, I fully expected the two Karnataka folks to not mention that he completed his engineering from College of Engineering, Pune.
I was just ready to move on, actually.
Was with the Bombay. No, I know you were ready to move on, but I had to remind you on about this very important fact. He cut his teeth in Maharashtra, and I mean, Vatsa at least alluded to the Khadakwasla Dam. But yes, I think it's incredible that a technocrat, flourished in that era, in the British era, and then basically was given the Bharatvaarta Award very early on. Really inspirational, and I just hope that the coming generations can pronounce his name accurately and give him the due respect which he deserves.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So that's a wrap of all the events of this week, right? We have a couple of fantastic episodes coming up. So, like we discussed, agriculture is one of those hot button topics at this point of time. Plenty of bills being passed, plenty of reforms happening, and we're going to do a deep dive on the politics of agriculture, right? So, why is it such a hot button issue as such, and who are the incumbent interests at hand, and what are their priorities, etc., etc. And also, Ashish, do you want to share a copy of that book? Yep, there you see on screen. So we have our friends Harsh Gupta and Rajiv Mantri who've written a fantastic book. I'm yet to get my hands on it. It's called A New Idea of India. And so you're going to be seeing Harsh and Rajiv talk about the book extensively on the podcast, discuss various facets of it, what went into it, and why it is important at this point of time for all of us to pick up a copy, maybe pick up like 4, gift it to all of our friends and family, and read about it. Closing comments, Ashish, Vatsa, anything else?
I'm looking forward to getting the book. It's been shipped, so we should get it next week. We know Harsh and Rajiv, they're very intelligent and articulate gentlemen, and come with a lot of clarity of thought. So it'll be great to hear them talking about the book. So really looking forward to that episode.
Yeah. So, all right, that's a wrap from us here at Bharatvaarta. This was the weekly. Thank you so much for joining us. Follow us on social media. We're at Bharatvaarta on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Do let us know what you think about our content. We'll be back with more episodes shortly. Until then, stay safe, take care, and Jai Hind.